done always a wonderful job here, and I have to tell you that Northampton County is the oldest, has the oldest continuous record. And I get docked if I don't say that, you know, in that court. They dock my enormous pay, which I'm sure you all can relate to. I'm looking forward to this meeting. I hope we'll have a really good discussion. We've got a lot of friends here from Davis to the north and across the bay. We appreciate everybody who made the trip. And I'm going to turn the meeting over to Larry, and let's get started.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Thank you so much for coming tonight. We really appreciate it. This is the 7th regional. I have my schedule, so I have to check on it. The 7th regional meeting that we're having this year. This has been a very, very valuable experience. I hope it has been for everybody attending. It certainly has been for us, your team of members of the VACO staff, who do our best to represent you to the General Assembly and the state agencies and all the other functions that we try to serve you with. And these meetings are very important for a number of reasons. Number one, it gets us out of the office, which is a very important part of what we do, because we can't really learn as much as we should know about our members unless we get out of our office, unless we're getting out to the regions, unless we're attending your board members, listen to the types of issues that you are considering there, discussing there. And also, it's very important for us to hear from you. And maybe we'll have to this evening some news to share about certain developments that are taking place in Richmond that will be affecting you over the next few months as we prepare for the General Assembly. Before I go any further, I think it's very important to go around the room at least and ask everybody to please introduce themselves. Starting with Mr. Reginald.
Jim Reginald, Fiscal Analytics, VACO Policy Consultant.
Grayson Chester, Supervisor, District 3, ACMAC, all the way in the northwest end of the county, where there's numeral 1.
Randall Hogg, District 1 Supervisor. I'm at the other end. I'm at the tip at the other end. We've got it first and last.
Harrison Phillips, Accomack County District 5 Supervisor, right in the middle of Accomack.
Robert Crockett, Accomack County Supervisor, representing election District 6, which is in the southern portion of Accomack. I'm also the vice chair of our board. Our chair, Ron Wolf, made it because he's officiating the high school cycle. And just to piggyback on something that Northampton's chair said about the continuous records in the country, Accomack can boast having the first sheriff in the country. Yeah, that was me. That was in 1634. So they get the records, we get the law enforcement.
That's the deal. Thank you, Rob.
Anybody else who wants to share a history of the county?
I'm Paul Bewley. I'm Supervisor of District 4 in Accomack County, and I've got a long, narrow district from Honey Creek, right to plug up to Grayson's, and all the way up to Staxis on the basin.
Great, thank you.
Billy Joe Tarr, I'm the Accomack County Board Supervisor for the beautiful land across the water, District 1, Chickadee Island.
Larry Lamont, District 2, Northampton County, and I'm also the vice chair of the board.
Robert Dorr, District 5, Northampton County.
Spencer Murray, District 4, which is Eastville and most of the center part of the county and some of the next.
Bill Robertson, Prince George County, and I'm the first vice president of VACO.
Jerry Stolsky, Prince George County.
Oliver Bennett, Board Supervisor, Northampton County. It passed Region 1 Director. It passed President of VACO.
That's right.
Oh, you finished? I'll make sure you know that. Hi, I'm Celia Major, Accomack County, representing election District 9, which is the most southern district of Accomack County. I guess I'm unique because I also work in Northampton County.
Donald Hart, District 8 Supervisor, Accomack, also VACO's Secretary Treasurer.
Steve Meyer, Accomack County Administrator.
Marvell Gordy, Accomack County Board of Supervisors, District 7. I also have 4 corners in the new hospital. I did that for you.
Good for you.
Good evening, I'm Danny Jones with Sussex County. I'm the Deputy County Administrator.
Good evening, John Andrieski, I'm the Acting County Administrator for Northampton County.
Hi, I'm Brooke Thomas. I'm the Finance Director for Northampton County Schools.
Gage Carter, VACO staff.
Kathleen Guzzi, I'm with Bay Corp.
I'm Kate Boyle, VACO staff.
Good evening, Jim Birch with VACO staff.
Curtis Smith, Director of Planning, Academic Northampton Planning District Commission.
And Janice Williams with the County Administrator's Office in Northampton.
Just want everybody to know when we do hold these regional meetings, us, members of the VACO staff do try to support your local companies by getting your very finest restaurants. Do enjoy that experience. As you entered tonight, before we took your places, I hope that you enjoyed some of the refreshments we had out here that were very generously sponsored by Virginia Association of Counties Risk Pool, VACOR. And they have very generously sponsored our events at these regional meetings, and Kathleen Guzzi is here from VACOR tonight. She'd just like to make a few remarks.
Thank you, Larry. I'll be brief because I know this is a very important topic that is near and dear to all of us. As Larry said, I'm Kathleen Guzzi. VACOR is Virginia Association of Counties Risk Management Programs, which is your insurance pool. But for 30 years prior to me joining VACOR, I really sat where you sat. I was in local government for 30 years, the last 11 as county administrator first in Bedford and then in Botetourt. So folks ask me, why did I make the switch? The switch is very simple. Basically, my 3 key premises and principles that I adhered to when I was county administrator is basically what VACOR is all about. First is customer service. You are our members, we are here for you. So if there's anything we can do, you have any questions, any comments, any concerns, you don't really understand what something's going on, you want us to provide a new service, come see us. You guys do customer service day in and day out. You know that for your citizens and your visitors, and that's what we're all about. We're here to listen to you, our members. Second, financial stability. I started in local government as a budget analyst. And once a budget analyst, always a budget analyst. I'm all about making sure that the stability of the pool is there for you all, but also the stability of the rates. You know you don't like surprises in the budget. So if there have to be increases, we need them small and incremental, and that's what we're all about. I served on the board of directors for VACOR for 8 years, and I really got to see firsthand how financially well sound they are, how financially well run they are, and now I'm pleased to be a part of it. And last but not least, the third basic principle is safety. I know I used to tell my fire and EMS folks, your most important job at the end of the day is to come back safe and sound. So anything that we can do to help improve safety in your communities, small or large, we come in and help you set up safety committees. We come in and do training. There's an awful lot of training that is available, all free of charge because you're a member. It's either online, we have DVDs, and then we do classroom training. I love to come in and talk to folks and help them either provide a safer environment and or do some of the HR kind of stuff that we don't really like to talk about, but we have to. Sexual harassment, violence in the workplace, etc. So if you're not taking advantage of our free training, please give me a call. So thank you for your time, and I can't wait to hear Mr. Reginald, because this is, as we know, a very, very important topic, not just today, but going forward. So thank you all very much.
Yeah, thank you very much, Kathleen. Just to tell you a little bit more about the agenda that we have planned tonight, one of the things, of course, we're going to do is hear a presentation from Jim Reginald, who I'll be introducing in just a few minutes. And he's going to be talking about the very important subject of K-12 funding and what we foresee over the next session of the General Assembly. Just also want to say that after that, we will be asking each county to share with us information about what they see as maybe their most significant issues that they might want to have reflected in VACO's legislative program. As many of you know, VACO is now in the throes of developing its 2017 legislative program. You okay over there? A spare chair is available. You're set now? I hope everybody else is here. But this is a very important part of what we do in the development, again, of our 2017 legislative program. I know that many of you, of course, are familiar, look very familiar to me because we saw you just about a month ago. It's hard to believe that was almost a whole month ago when our steering committees met down in Midlothian, Virginia, to start with development of the legislative program. Just want to let you know that next week, VACO's Resolutions Committee is going to be holding a meeting on September 21st. And what each steering committee chair will do is we expect it will be to report on what each steering committee is recommending for this legislative program. Shortly thereafter, we will be sending to all of the counties a draft legislative program in late September, certainly by the early part of October at the very latest. We really would like to have you as county officials reviewing this document, discussing it among yourselves, and also informing VACO through a process that we will inform you of, to tell us either through resolution or a letter what your county might want to see added to that legislative program, and those will be made parts of the agendas of our steering committees when they meet, when we hold our annual conference in November in Bath County, which I hope that you will all be able to attend. What we hear tonight from you, again, is very important to us because we have what we call our copious note takers. Copious is a very, very significant word to our team here at VACO because what we hear from you is taken very seriously. So just want you to know that. And I guess without any further ado, I think the next thing that this script tells me to do is to introduce our speaker, who happens to be Jim Regibald. Jim Regibald has 34 years of experience in the state and local budget, tax policy analysis. He served for 12 years on the staff of the Virginia Senate Finance Committee, and where he provided the committee with expertise on tax policy, economic revenue forecasting, transportation, and finance agency budgets. In 1999, he co-founded Fiscal Analytics, where his expertise in state and local budget and tax policy issues have been provided to local governments, business groups, trade associations, and nonprofit organizations. Today, Jim will discuss some school funding for what happened during the 2016 legislative session, and we will review of what to expect in the 2017 General Assembly session. And thanks, Larry.
Larry, before he starts, may I interrupt you? Ladies and gentlemen, just so you'll know, our president of VACO just walked in. That's Judy Little from Surrey County and all of her delegation. Judy, so nice to have you on the shore. And the other representatives from Surrey County are here also. They're in the back, they just came in. So, and I also want you to know, Region 1, we only have 6 executive board members in VACO, and Region 1 has 3 of them. You have the president, first vice president, and secretary treasurer from this region, and there's 13 regions, so we have 3 of the 6 from, so we've got good representation and people that'll fight for us. So, Judy, so glad you're here. Thank you for coming.
Don, Larry, real quick, Olive White is here too, Mr. Robertson.
Olive White is here. Sorry about that.
Anybody else here who would like to introduce themselves? Before we started the meeting by having everybody just introduce themselves. And Rob, see it's just now.
Okay, John Seward, Surrey County. I'm actually the Region 1 director. Apologize for being a little tardy. Traffic coming through the Hampton Road Bridge and all that.
There was a, good evening everyone. There was a important part of my bio that was left out. I've actually owned a condominium in Bay Creek for 9 years. So I come here all the time, and I consider myself a significant taxpayer in Northampton. I've enjoyed it. I've enjoyed all my time here. I love the Eastern Shore. So what I'm going to try to do tonight is give you a little detail on the current state budget situation and how K-12 funding fits into that, what the prospects might be, what you might expect, and then why you're feeling the pressure you are. I'm sure you know that better than I do. And I'm going to end on talking about the composite index, because I was asked to do that, talk about the local composite, how it works, and give you an idea of what you might expect in the future. So I might give you enough information to kind of do your own forecasting of that as well. You've all heard that we had a revenue shortfall, 280 million almost. Of course, that meant that we had extra money in 16 to spend in 17. That's gone because we didn't get it all. So that went right in. That was going to go right into spending in this current biennium that we started. But it also lowers the base. And I'm not going to get into all the economics. The simple reason why we didn't meet our forecast, even though we met our forecast for wage growth and employment growth, the employment growth occurred in low-wage jobs. And for a little bit, that got me scratching my head because I couldn't figure out how you could have wage and salary growth of 4.2%, but withholding growth only 2.4%. It's because if you have most of that wage growth occurring in the low job, they don't pay income taxes. They don't meet the thresholds, they don't pay the higher rates. Sometimes they don't meet enough even to pay any income taxes at all. So if a Walmart employee goes from $9 to $10 an hour, that's a 10% boost in wages, but there's no income tax increase. So that's what happened to the state. And we had 50% of our job growth in low-wage jobs and only 15% high. And it has been for years, basically a third in the low, third in the middle, a third high. Last year it wasn't. So we don't know if that's a change in trend or not. The forecast going forward is for another 1.7%. And here's my opinion on that. We had 1.7 in 16 just happened. They're now forecasting that interim forecast. The governor asked another 1.7, and then lower from 3.8 to 3.6 and 18. That's why we have that nearly 1.5 billion current problem for the 17-18 budget. That's going to be reforecast. That's not over yet. We'll do another one in December. We'll see how our revenues go. I personally think it's going to be better than that. So there's my good news. I think 1.7 is going to be too low. But we got to wait as we get through, as revenues come in. The way right now they're anticipating to meet that nearly 1.5 billion biennial problem is the salary increases, which were contingent, as you know. Both the teacher salaries you might have already given, you're 2%. You're not going to get any state help, at least at this point. And then the state employee as well, state support locals. That was, well over $300 million. And then they got $600 million that they can use in rainy day funds for the 2 years. So what that leaves right now, before we do any more forecasting, come through the fall and December, is about $300 million shortfall that they don't know how to solve, and $200 million in 18. So that's another $500 million that they're not sure. Now again, that may change if we continue to get better revenues than we expect right now. So you can see, here's one of the major reasons why you're feeling the pain at the local level, because 30% of the state general fund goes back to K-12, and another 20% or so, actually 15%, goes to your other local programs. Helps you out. But we used to have 6% revenue growth. You can go back even 10 years, 20, 30 years back before that, 6%. And of course, inflation's lower than it has been. That's part of the reason. But you can see since the recession, we've had an average of less than 2%. And so the state is struggling. And I'm going to show you in a second, you actually have worse revenue growth in the state. I mean all the localities, not just necessarily the Eastern Shore. But all localities have worse revenue growth than that. And here's what actually came in 16, and then the forecast for 17 and 18. Now, this is an eye chart. I know you've got it with you, but I always like to let people see this. This is an actual compilation of the state budget by secretarial area for the most part. And so if you have to come up with $300 million in 17 and $200 million in 18, where are you going to get that money from? I mean, there's about 6 or 7 major things that the state spends money on. First, K-12, 29% of the general fund. Then you have Medicaid, 21, 22%. That's over 50%, just those 2 programs. Higher education, another almost $2 billion. Public safety, you can see, 1.9 billion. You've got the car tax, and you've got debt service. Those are all built in, those are baked in. Comp board, pretty much baked in. The court system. So where are they going to find that money? And oftentimes in the past, they found it by readjusting the standards of quality. So that would lower the amount they would pay for public ed. And so I'll show you a chart on how they did that in the last recession. So that's a worry. You've already taken a hit because you're not going to get this right here, this amount is already wrong. You got 5.9 because you got to take the salary increase out of that. The teacher salary that was contingent. So that's already out of there. One of the points of good news is my contacts are telling me that even though they had a lot of spending in Medicaid, they actually had more than enough money. And they don't see any signs due to the managed care contracts that they have that they're going to have to put more money into Medicaid. Now, that's just what I hear so far. So that's good news, that they're not going to have to siphon more money into Medicaid than what they're currently budgeting for. This debt service, we used to be a pay-as-you-go state. We used to actually put cash for capital into the things we built. That ended 20 years ago, more or less, and we've been borrowing pretty much ever since. And even though we got low interest rates, that bill has been coming due. Those borrowings, that's why we're well over $700 million now each year, this current biennium. That's baked in. They can't cut that. And there's not much refinancing they can do either. They've done most of that they can do at the low rates. So that's pretty much baked in. So, you know, is more local government funding from the state at risk? Yes, it is. It is at risk. And it can come in all sorts of different ways. You know, I show you K-12 share. So these are all the other programs that make up in total. You used to get 52% at the high point, right before the recession of the state's general fund. You're now getting 42%. That's a tremendous reduction in relative amounts of funding coming back to localities from the state, just over that relatively short period of time. That's one of the reasons you're feeling the pain at the local level, because you have to carry much more of the responsibility than you used to have to carry. So these are the various, health and human service things can be cut. Public safety programs like HB 599, which I don't know if too many in the Eastern Shore get that because your counties over here. I don't think any of you do. It's mostly going to cities. But they probably won't cut the jail per diems, I don't think. Certainly the sheriffs you rely on. And they could cut some of that, that's possible. Money for your local sheriff's department. So anyhow, health and human services definitely that could be on some of that could be on the chopping block. Now I want to step back and say, okay, well, how did K-12 funding do? Actually, in the adopted budget last March, K-12 did a little better than it had been doing. It got actually a little bit better share than its total funding. It got almost 40% of all the new money. Remember I told you it was getting about, you're now getting about 30% of the general fund, so it got a little bit greater share. They prioritized K-12. Now, take out the salaries and it's back down to where it was. It really didn't get any more money than you've been getting altogether. 5.6 wasn't a bad increase. So when you hear the legislators say we prioritize K-12, they did it. They prioritized to the extent they could. But again, some of that's going to be cut out automatically unless revenues are better and they can find a way to restore some of those salary cuts. These are some of the, I'm not going to go through this, these are some of the major places they put. This re-benchmarking is supposed to be done automatically. That was almost half of the new money. This is sort of automatic re-benchmarking. And remember, re-benchmarking is using data that's up to 4 years old. So you're paying for current costs. The state does its re-benchmarking based on 4 to 2 years ago. Okay, and so you get hurt that way too. You pay current teacher salary costs, current costs for buses, bus maintenance, gasoline, insurance, etc. The state re-benchmarks based on 2 to 4 years ago. But that was $400 million, that re-benchmarking. They put in general funds to free up lottery monies to send back to you on a more flexible basis. They needed to put general funds in to free up the lottery. Because the lottery is all used to pay for public ed. It all is. But in times past, whenever lottery monies would go up, they would remove general funds. Because it's all fungible. So I always view lottery as a general fund. It's not technically, but it essentially is. Because, they can put, lottery goes up, they can just remove general funds and put it somewhere else. So really, it's the same as a duck. Again, they also, another note I want to make here is that they went a year early to fully fund, to bring the VRS contribution rates up to 100% of their actuarial evaluation. You know, during the recession, the way they saved money, the state, was to cut funding for, they couldn't take money out of the trust fund itself, that's illegal. But you can just slow down the contributions that are required. And that's what they did. And so that ballooned their unfunded liability. They've been trying to catch up with that. They had a 10-year plan to do that. They've accelerated that. That required more general funds to accelerate that. But remember now, the state only pays about 40%, actually a little less than that, of the retirement costs. That's because you would think it's their share of the SOQ is 55 and your share is 45 on a statewide basis. Well, the SOQ doesn't cover all the positions. It doesn't cover anywhere near all the positions. They've defined it so that it's a minimum standard, and then every locality, except for unfortunately maybe Petersburg coming up, is going to be, you know, goes well beyond. In fact, on average, localities go 100% beyond what their required local effort is. You go 100% beyond. So on average, in total, localities, the required effort should be $3.6 billion to meet the SOQ requirements of the state. Localities put in $7.2 billion public aid, not 3.6. I'm sure you in the Eastern Shore are well above your required minimums as well. So by the SOQ not covering all the positions, you have to fund 100% of that retirement cost for that uncovered position. That's why it's flipped. The localities pay 60+% of the retirement VRS costs, contribution costs. The state only pays 40% or less. So when they put money, when they raise that rate to meet that actuarial requirement, which, you know, they raised it from 14.66, which is what it was prior to them deciding to go to 100%, they brought it to 16.3%. And that's going to cost you about 80 million more. You, again, in the generic sense, all localities across Virginia. That's an 80 million extra cost you have to cover because they raised the rates. Does that make sense, everyone? Now, and again, generically, this chart, you have these in front of you. If you can't see, I know there's posts and stuff. What I try to depict here is state on a per pupil basis how much funding the state is providing for K-12 on a per pupil basis. So this blue bar right here is actual per pupil dollars the state's provided. You can see in 2009 it was almost $5,300 per pupil statewide they were providing. It took until 17, and again that's going to go down because of the loss of the salary money. It took to 17 to get the nominal dollars that they paid in 2009 on a per pupil basis. That's a long time. And then there's also been inflation during that time period. And so if you take the inflation out, low as it is, on average about 2%, you're only at $41.50 in 17. So you're way below the real 47. You're $600 per pupil less than what you're getting on a real dollar basis of what you're actually having to pay for in your localities, you know, when you adjust it for inflation. So that's a real big reason why localities feel stressed on their local school divisions, because the state is not giving you as much money per pupil. So what did they do, you know, in 2009? Essentially, these were all the result of that Great Recession. The biggest thing they did is they redefined what they're going to pay for support positions. They just decided to pay for less support positions without getting into all the detail. And that saved them $750 million in a biennium over a 2-year period. And that continues today. They have a lower standard that they pay for support positions. And then there's a whole series of other, almost all of them are in what I call a support category. So they decided not to politically say we're cutting the classroom, but they cut everything else that supports that classroom in the standards of quality. And that saved them 1.7, and that's why this chart looks like what it does. Okay, well, there's less money. So it really is it's really the tail wagging the dog. And that's similar to today's story, about low revenues. They had low revenues, they didn't want to raise taxes because it was a recession, and there's a reason for that, so you can understand that better than I do. So they didn't have the money, they had to find it somewhere. They didn't want to cut the state police on them, etc. They couldn't really cut Medicaid much, because that's a 50-50 shared state-federal program. And we're already kind of at the minimum of what we do in Medicaid. It was hard to cut that. They did some. They cut hospitals, they cut provider rates, they did some. But they didn't go to big places, and they cut higher ed a lot too. So they only have a few places to go, and that's why K-12 took on the chin through these policy changes. So we talked already a little bit about how the standards of quality do not reflect really what you're doing at the local level. There's a whole bunch of ways. I'll give you a couple of examples here. So if we raised, they keep teacher salaries low. What they recognize in the budget and pay for a teacher salary is the prevailing cost. But for many localities, for most localities, they pay way more than the prevailing cost. Okay, and so that's one way the state tamps down how much they pay. They also don't recognize, as I said, all opposition. I'll give you a couple examples. And actually, VML and VACO put budget amendments to try to get funding restored for these positions in the last session. And at least in the case of assistant principals, the Virginia State Board of Education is looking at trying to at least recommend a new standard to the General Assembly to better fund assistant principals. And you can see what I mean. So the SOQ funds 2,600 teacher aides. Localities employ 19,000 teacher aides. Okay, they only fund 2,600, basically in kindergarten and special ed. They also only fund 923 out of the 2,500 assistant principals employed in school divisions. And so that's an area where at least the board is starting to recognize, and they recognized it 15 years ago, they're revisiting that issue. So those are two examples of what they don't recognize in this, and they don't pay their share of. Now, this is what I told you about the $3.6 billion more. You can see there's 37 school divisions who actually pay more than 100% of the required level. Arlington, I know, is almost 200% of the required level. Another area in public ed where the money out of the literary fund. The literary fund is mostly coming from fines and fees that get deposited in unclaimed property, and alternative sources of revenue that go into the constitutional literary fund. That fund can be used for two purposes: helping float loans for school construction, and the Constitution allows it to be used for teacher retirement. And guess what it's being used for, mainly? Teacher retirement. Because if they use the literary fund for teacher retirement, their share, they don't have to put general funds in it. And so you can see down here at the bottom what's been used for. School construction loans, basically back to 2007, they've only had one little block of $53 million, is used for school construction. They've had a little bit for equipment, they've used some for tech equipment, and a little bit for interest rate subsidies. But the bulk of it, as you can see, is teacher retirement, hundreds of millions of that literary funds being used basically to substitute for general funds. So that's another way they save themselves money. As I said, the board is, right now, they're doing every 2 years they do a review of the SOQ. The problem is the board can only recommend, and they've almost given up, because they made a bunch of recommendations in the mid-2000s to beef up the SOQ. They were never adopted by the General Assembly and funded, so they kind of gave up for a while. There's been a lot of pressure on them to say, well, at least recommend what's right, what the school divisions are doing. At least acknowledge that what the SOQ should look like, should be. If General Assembly doesn't adopt it, well, they can at least put some pressure on them. So in the same time, that this funding problem has been occurring because of lack of revenues for K-12, the state school divisions have seen a mighty increase in at-risk students. And those are defined as those qualifying for free lunch. These are free. This doesn't include the partial free lunch. This is there's only the 100% free lunch. It's gone basically up almost 9%, 9 percentage points in less than 10 years. Percentage of students across Virginia are qualified for free lunch. And then you can see the demographics of our school divisions have changed. And you might know this, probably tell me, do you have more Hispanic students over the last 10 years in the Eastern Shore? Oh, I think you do. I mean, like I said, I've been coming over 9 years, and that's so you can see in Virginia as a whole, there's been a doubling of the Hispanic students. And a lot of the ESL, and you have something in common with Northern Virginia. This is Planning District 8 is in Northern Virginia. So statewide, 8% of the students are English second language students. In Northern Virginia, 18%. You may be similar here. Actually, the other place that's similar is Harrisonburg. So it's sort of, interestingly enough, Hampton Road is very low. Go across that bridge, it's very low, ESL. It's like 2 or 3%. So it's Northern Virginia, Harrisonburg, and probably here, Eastern Shore. You know, and beefing up the SOQ is not something that should be taken lightly, because you have to meet the SOL and the SOA achievement standards. And your schools are required to meet those, and that takes funding, it takes people, it takes good teachers, it takes resources to do that. And there is an achievement gap. There's an achievement gap, a big achievement gap for about 20% of our students in Virginia. And you can see the differences. Economically disadvantaged, you know, our English and math are below 70%. White and Asian, you know, students are 80 and 90%. There's an achievement gap. And so we need to direct resources to solve that achievement gap. And so that's a pressure on you and the state. Now I want to switch a little bit to, you know, the pressure that's on you, that's on your local governments. So I charted the state's main revenue source for how it funds K-12 is the individual income tax. That's 2/3 of general fund. Individual income's almost $13 billion now, 12.6 or 7 billion in 16. Out of the 19 to 20 billion is the individual income tax. And your main revenue source is real estate tax. So look how close they were back in 09 in terms of total dollars, 9.5 to 9 million. They had their recession, income tax went down, yours stayed flat, but look at the growth, the gap. Even though they've had that poor growth in general funds, you know, 1.9%, that's a lot better than we've had. It's a lot better than we've had in the real estate tax. That gap is hugely wide statewide. And that growth I showed you in dollars includes 77 localities raising their real estate tax rates just in the last 3 years alone. 77 localities. And from 09, cities, 14 cent per 100 increase in the real estate tax. You've been forced to raise your taxes. In counties, 9 cents. And then look at Region 1. It's similar. It's very similar. You know, ACMAC, tell me if I'm wrong, it comes out of the Weldon Cooper Center local tax rates book. You know your tax rates better than they do. I mean, you reported that to them, so I didn't survey each one of you guys, but tell me if those tax rates are wrong. Wrong.
Well, 61.
Which locality? It's 61. Well, then, oh, right here? That might be next year.
Your fiscal year is correct.
Yeah, that's the latest thing I had. So you actually raise it even further for this current year. Yeah. So, yeah, I put my head. So that's good to know. So it's still going up. So everyone except Sussex. Is Sussex here?
Yes.
Does Sussex hasn't raised their tax, or
It's
is it?
correct for that fiscal year, but we are now.
Going to be raising? Yeah, I mean, yeah, everyone's under pressure. That's the bottom line.
Northampton had a disastrous reassessment as well. On average, 17% reduction in assessed value. So we're looking at 83 cents for FY17.
So the state is not raising their taxes. I mean, they did for transportation, but not the general fund. And transportation, they go back to 87, the last tax raise there. So they've actually raiding the general fund tax sources like the insurance premiums tax, like the sales tax, to put it into transportation, taking it away from being able to use it for K-12 in the last 10 years. So this chart, the point of this chart is that, first, we're a fairly wealthy state. We rank 10th in per capita personal income. This shows you a 3-year change. This is from Joint Legislative Auditing. This is the General Assembly's auditing on. These are coming right from their books. We're a low tax state, relatively speaking, and a little higher when you just do it on a per capita basis, not as a percent of personal income, not as a percent of our wealth, in other words, because you can't really compare us to Mississippi per capita, because we get twice as much money as them, go in Northern Virginia. But the locals, you have fairly high taxes on a statewide basis compared to other states. We rank much higher. And another thing I want you to look at is our salaries. For a wealthy state, we rank 35th when we pay our teachers. And my view on that is it's going to be harder and harder to move forward to get quality teachers, good young people to go to that profession. We pay them $35,000 a year. That's sort of an editorial. Now, so that sort of gives you the background, at least from my point of view, and hopefully on public ed, and sort of where we are. I am somewhat optimistic that we're going to be better. I may be a lone ranger on this, but we're better than what they think right now, that 1.7, which will help. But I'm going to switch to the composite discussion of that, if you don't mind. So the composite index, I'm not sure what's some of the rationale for why you wanted this discussion, because I've had a number of times with various regions that they want to understand why their composite index is what it is. The composite index, if you don't know, and you probably all do, is how the state decides what share a school division or locality, in a larger sense, has to pay of their standards of quality. Okay, and on a statewide basis, they pay 55% of the standards of quality, the localities pay 45%, but it varies by every jurisdiction, varies depending on the calculation of this composite. And again, I'm going to read, because it's so important, I'm going to reiterate, the standards of quality is not what you're doing at the local level. That's that state-defined minimum standard. It's not actually what you're doing, but it's what they're going to share the payment of. So it's got 5 factors. It's got 3 in the numerator, and this goes back to the 1970s when this was created. Rick Brown was part of the group that created this, the current Secretary of Finance. He was working for the Department of Planning, he was on the task force that came up with this. And what it's supposed to do is it's supposed to, at least in a crude way, proxy what your revenue capacity is at a local level. So you have 50% of the numerator composite is true value of real estate. Okay, TVR, true value of real estate. So it takes all the assessed values around the state of every locality, and then it adjusts those every 2 years with a study that looks at the difference between the assessed value and the sales price. That a number of sales that occur in your locality, and then adjusts every locality based on the differences through a regression formula. Department of Taxation does that, and they get what's called the true value of real estate, so everyone's treated equally. Remember, some localities assess every 4 years, some every 2, some every 6, most every 1 year, but so you can't do it just on assessed value. Even though it's pretty fair, you have to make that adjustment based on actual sales. So that's 50%, because that's what it's supposed to reflect. 50% of the locality's revenue source comes from real estate. Okay? That was at the time. And it's still kind of true. 40% of Virginia adjusted gross income, that's a proxy for all your other taxes. 10% sales tax, because 10% is taxable sales, because you get a portion of the state sales tax, that represents about 10% of your local tax base. So the AGI portion is supposed to represent all your other taxes, all the other ways you raise revenue. So it's very crude. It's a very crude way of doing it. And then the denominator is 2/3 average daily memberships, your public student population, and 1/3 population, and 1/3 population. Now it used to be all ADM when it first started. There is only 2 adjustments that have ever been made to this basic formula. That's one of them. And Ed Willey, who was the chairman of the Senate Finance Committee in the 80s, wanted to help Richmond out. He had enough power. And it actually made a lot of sense to go from all ADM to only 2/3, 1/3. I would argue it shouldn't even be that high, because what it's doing is it's assuming that all your obligations for your revenue capacity are only for public ed. It makes the assumption you don't have public safety, health and welfare, infrastructure, all these other responsibilities, and those vary across localities as well. So by having all ADM, or the majority ADM, it's making that assumption that your capacity can all be used for students. And that's not true. So I don't like that part of it. And he did change that. And the second one is, and the only one in this group that can takes advantage of it is, and this, I'm telling you a little bit about this, A.L. Philpott got this changed. If you have more than 3% of your Virginia adjusted gross income coming from non-residents, people from outside the state, not Richmonders, non-residents, North Carolinians, Maryland, D.C., Kentucky, then you get, because they have a business or they come work across the border, and they have to file a Virginia income tax return, okay? You get to remove that from your AGI. And there's 33 localities that can do that. Accomack's the only one in this group because they're coming over from Maryland to work in Accomack. So you have 7% of your VAGI is from non-residents. And you get to remove that, and that actually helps you almost a full percentage point. Reduces your composite index. So those are the only two things that have been adjusted. I would argue, this is an aside, that non-resident adjustment makes no sense at all. It's because those people coming in provide taxes, pay taxes, they pay BPOL, they pay their business property, they pay all the tax. Why is that big? That's part of the revenue capacity of your locality. They pay taxes.
Accomack would disagree with that.
Well, I'm sure you would, and I understand that. But when you think about it, you don't get an income tax. It would make a lot of sense to look at a local income tax. Then you might not get it from them in the same degree, but you don't. So those are the two changes. Now, there's only one thing, basically, that the composite index does not apply to, and that's the sales tax distribution based on school-age population. So if we have $6 billion in state money going back to localities through the SOQ, we can remove $1 billion approximately for that sales tax distribution. There's $5 billion left. That's all influenced by the composite index. That's why it's so important. Okay, it decides where that money goes, that $5 billion. This is the formula you'll need to know. But I will show you this. The most important factor in the composite index is your student population. That influences it more than anything. That has the highest weighting. The second highest weighting is the true value of property. Okay? So movement occurs in your composite index for the biggest reason being if you are losing students. If you're losing students, it's perverse, your composite goes up. Because they assume you have more capacity you have more capacity, you don't have to spend it on as many students. But you know full well that's not the case. If you have, let's say, an average of 26 kids per class and you lose, you go down to 25, you still have the same teacher, you still have the same bill, you have the same, so you know, it's a double punishment. And also, the money paid out in the SOQ is not a block grant, it's paid out on a per pupil basis. So you lose twice. You lose by getting fewer, that $5,000 less from not having that kid, plus your composite goes up. And that's not just, there's some localities in this region that have that situation, but Richmond is a great example. They have much less student population than they have regular population. So it hurts them. Here's a listing where you lie on the scale. These are all localities plotted, and the lowest in this region is Prince George, and then Southampton, and then Accomack and Sussex are right together, around the I think 0.34. Then Isle of Wight, Northampton's pretty high.
We agree.
I'm going to show you why. I'm going to show you why you're high. Why is for people like me coming in, and you have that development. Well, that's part of it. That's not all. So here's Northampton. I'm going to break it down for you. Composite is, okay? So what I did was I took, the way you can do this, and you can look at it, you can do it yourself too, and so you can also forecast, because there's a delay in how, the data for the current composite index is 2013 data, except for everything except ADM. Everything except ADM, and that is more current. But everything else, because they don't get final tax returns until tax year 13, that's the latest available. Okay, so 2013, so you can see, look how, at the height of the housing boom, Northampton had almost 0.28% of the state. That's what that means. That's the percent of the state. you had almost 0.28% of the state's real estate value, true value real estate. That's gone down. That's gone down a lot, about a third. And so what that will naturally do, just that by itself, is lower your composite index. So now I weighted, by the proper weighting, 50, 40, 10, you get a weighted average of your numerator. As you can see, your numerators dropped a lot. That should lower your composite index. But look also what happened. You lost students. You lost a lot of students on a relative basis to the state. Remember what I said was the most important factor? ADM. And so, yeah, your composite index went down some, but because you lost so many students and a little bit of population as a percent of the state, you didn't go down nearly as much as your real estate values went down. They went down a third. A third. So that's Northampton.
How does that relate to students moving from the public school system to the private school system?
Oh, you would lose ADM? Those are only public school students counted. Now the only place where it's not is, remember what I said, that $1 billion in sales tax that's distributed outside of the composite index? That's based on school-age population. That includes private school. That includes all of your kids in your county. So there is a portion, 1/6 of the distribution is based on all students from the state.
But as you said, the buildings are the same, the kids are the same, the teachers are the same, the expenses are the same, revenue down.
Right. So, yeah. And there's a reverse, well, the reverse side of that is too. And so there are economies of scale for those localities that are gaining students. They have economies of scale. Their composite goes down. So the reverse is also true. So I agree, it really hurts those who are leaving students. It hurts them the worst. There's tough decisions that have to be made when you have that situation. You get less funding. So here's Accomack. Accomack, again, they lost real estate value. They basically stayed the same. Their wealth stayed the same in terms of your income, right here. And let's go back to Northampton. You lost a little bit in terms of wealth. A little bit, not as much as you can. So Accomack went down its numerator a little bit, the weighted average, and it went down quite a bit. That's quite a bit, really, especially in population as a percent of the state. And so you went down. You went down because you went down. Yeah, you went down more up here in your numerator than you did in your denominator. So you gained, you lost a little bit. Prince George, Bill was telling me one of the reasons why their issue is for leave in Prince George, and they actually went up. Your values went up. Your numerator went up. You stayed pretty much the same. So guess what? Your composite index went up because you're viewed as having more capacity now than you did in 05. Surrey, your numerator went up. Now, the reason I said you can do this yourself, your finance people, because this is 13 data. So if you got a good sense of what your assessments are doing, for 15 even, 15 is going to be the base year for the next biennium. You'll already know that. So you have a good sense that, well, my real estate value is went up 10%. You can have a pretty good idea that your composite index is going to go up. So if your ADM went down or up, you know that. So you can get a pretty good sense of how that'll do it. You can pretty much do in your head, which direction it's going to go. And then well, Surrey, this is the nuclear power plant. Look at how much more their real estate is than their income of their residents or their taxable sales or even their student population. I mean, they're fractions of their real estate. It's because it's all the nuclear power plant. So guess what that does? This shows you the power of having that very valuable assessed property. They had a very high composite index. And the reason they went from 0.66 to 0.8 is because they lost students. So they not only had a power plant, then they started bleeding students, and that kicked their composite up even more to the max. So they're at the max. They're at 0.8. That's the max. You can't go beyond that. There is one. I'm going to throw some out and tell me if I'm right here. So when the state's cutting funding for schools, which they have been doing, and you're at 0.8, it doesn't hurt you as bad because you're not relying on the state as much. You never have been. But if you're relying on the state a lot, you have this Prince George, you have this very low composite index, and you're relying on them. So the good side is you get a lot of state money relative, but when the state starts cutting, man, you get hammered. Because a big chunk of your budget now is being cut because it's from the state. Sussex didn't move much, but they did lose students again, and that's why the composite index went up quite a bit. Their numerator didn't change, but they lost students in population relative to the state. That's a pretty big move, 6 points, 6+ points. That's a big move in the composite index. I mean, that hits your budget pretty hard. So, a few comments now about the composite. Maybe a discussion, if anyone wants to chime in, it's fine. The revenue effort, as I said, that numerator, doesn't necessarily capture all the other needs. For example, I said health and human service, or infrastructure, you know, or your poverty levels, you know, or public safety needs. It doesn't necessarily capture that. Another thing is the adjusted gross income. I call it the Warren Buffett effect. And let's say you had Warren Buffett living in your locality, and he was filing his tax return at $100 million a year, or anyone. But he lived in a 3-bedroom ranch house like he does in Omaha, because he couldn't get any property taxes out of it. Guess what? They don't use median AGI, they use gross AGI in the calculation, the total. So if you have one rich guy or two rich guys, you can skew your entire composite index. So I think that is something that they should use median. They should use the, you know, I'll give you an example of Chesterfield. I haven't know in my area. Chesterfield has a 0.33, they didn't even Chesterfield's here. They have a 0.33 composite index. Richmond has a 0.46. Chesterfield's household income average is $72,000. Richmond's is $36,000. Richmond has a much higher composite index. It doesn't make any sense. But, and that's partly because of the two reasons in Richmond. It's because of the barbell effect. There are a few really rich people living on Carey Street, and they don't have hardly any students relative to their population. They're in private school, or they moved out of the county. They have young people, old people living in there with no kids. So that's just the fact. That's why you know they have a quarter less students than they have the percentage of the population. So they have a high composite index. Chesterfield has a lot of kids per population. And so that's what I say here. There's another factor. This is what Northern Virginia would argue. They argue that they have the burden of a 3-bedroom, 2-ranch, 2-bath house costs $800 grand up there. It's the same standard of living as a 3-bedroom, 2-bath ranch in Hampton or Newport News. But it counts against them in TVRE, even though it's the same house, same standard of living. See, they get that large. So it's not just wealth; it's cost of living as well. And they get this. In Northern Virginia, and so I go all over the place. They want to know what it's called. That's why it's so difficult to change, because everyone has a beef with it. And so if you go to, they'll say that in Northern Virginia, and they say the cost of competing money that they get, which is like it's been knocked down to about a 10% boost. Okay, but that has to go, so that gets added to the SOQ, but then that gets carved up by the composite index. So in some cases, they only get 20% of it. Like at Arlington or Alexandria or Fairfax gets points. So they get the money added in, but then they get split by the composite index. So if you adjusted for cost of living in the composite index, there would be huge changes in how the money flows around the state. Okay, it wouldn't be that little amount to that cost of competing thing. You know, so another thing I like to show people is how the composite index, there's only really one other statewide stress ranking, and that's the Commission on Local Government does the fiscal stress. And the interesting thing about the CLG ranking is it includes revenue effort, and it includes median household income. So it's revenue capacity, which is somewhat similar to the numerator of the composite index. Then it has median household income, and it has revenue effort. What's your effort? You're trying to, how much money do you have to tax out of your capacity? And then it rates your stress. If you're having to really take a lot of money, then, you know, with your capacity, then you're considered stressed. And what struck me here in this region is it's actually pretty close. And it's not like that usually. Usually there's pretty good swings. And you have the composite is up here maybe and the fiscal stress down here or vice versa. Not in every case. But look at Accomack. Both those rankings are right on the button. You rank 66th, you know, in terms of the lowest out of the 135 school divisions, and fiscal stress is 66. So Accomack seems to be doing a pretty good job of measuring you. You know, you may not agree, but it seems to be, at least from that way of looking at it. There are differences here. In Northampton, you have a pretty high LCI. Your fiscal stress is lower. I mean, you are worse in that measure. One is bad. You know, 135 would be very good. You wouldn't be stressed at all. So you have a higher stress than your composite. Prince George, you have a much lower comp than what that says in terms of your stress. Oh.
Impact aid from the federal government probably.
Yeah, well.
A third of our school system comes from the base.
So that, but anyhow, that was another way for me to kind of check, see if you guys were wildly off, and if there's, you know. So what do I've already mentioned a lot of these things about what I think I'd be doing to improve the composite index. You can't, all your responsibilities can't be summed up with this composite the way they do it now, with using ADMs 2/3 of the denominator, and the crude measure of revenue capacity, and really no check, no look at revenue effort, what you have to do to fulfill your demand from Virginia, give you a lot better. Yes, sir.
I'm sure other states have another way of doing it. And the state of Virginia consider looking at more equitable ways of giving up this pot of money.
Right. I've looked at them. And I've actually done studies and I've printed and looked at them. One of the ways is they do, we call ourselves a foundation system in distribution, but it really isn't. And a lot of states do what's more toward a foundation. In other words, they'll provide a block of money for the normal student, and they'll try to figure out what the cost of living is in various regions, and then say, we'll give a share for this kind of cost of living region, and then if you have more at-risk students, more special ed, more ESL, we'll give you boosts above that basic amount, and they'll try to compare cost of living regions, and we do it, and we don't do it that way. We do it with SSQ. It kind of treats everyone the same, and then a very crude LCI. So yes, states do it. It's all over the map, but a lot of them, I mean, to me, that seems like a much better way of doing it. We tried to propose that, actually. VML Baco proposed that. Hard though, you know why it's hard? Because the only way to make a big change is you've got to throw a bunch of money at it and make sure nobody's worse off in that system than they are now.
There's one area that rural Virginia benefits greater than the rest of the state in regards to education. They get a subject like teachers now because they compete with Maryland schools.
That's the cost of competing I was mentioning.
So they get that.
Right. That was the cost of competing. I mentioned it was 18%, and then for support now it's 10%. But as I said, that gets carved up by the composite index, so it's not nearly as much as you think. And if you took that same cost of living difference, you put it into the numerator of the composite index. That's what I was trying to explain. Fairfax's composite would go down from 0.7 something to 0.5, and it would. All the money in the state would flow to Northern Virginia.
The net result in the teacher's pocket is better. It may, the budget may not be better, but the net result in the teacher's pocket.
Yeah, they pay more for it, they do, but it's not necessarily from state money. It's not from state money. Very little of it is from state money. Most of it's on local money. That's what I was saying when you looked at, remember that required local effort chart? Northern Virginia localities, they all, I'm not trying to defend them. I'm just telling you the fact. They are all above 100%. They put their own money into that required local effort. So they do what the state says, and then they double or triple it. What they're going to put in. Because they have to pay their teachers more to attract them, because they're competing. And the state puts a little bit in that cost of competing, but it's small. Because
that's something you can add to the legislative agenda. Include Accomack in that formula because we border Maryland. And we compete with Maryland schools as far as teacher pay.
That's been done. Not Accomack, but they have spread that out. So there are some. It's not just the corridor of Virginia. They get a less amount, but if you're in like Stafford, Spotsylvania, King William, they do get a little boost because of that. So that's possible. we talked about the revenue due to income concentration, and JLARC even suggested using median income instead of gross, which would solve the problem if you have a couple rich people living in your I actually, again, I don't think that it's very accurate to use ADM as 2/3 of the denominator, because it makes you spend half your money, tell me this, you spend half your money on K-12, is it half? Is it 2/3? Is it 2/3? No, you spend 2/3. Is it 2/3?
It's 17 million of our 35, 36.
It's about half.
It's about half.
It's about half. So what would make sense then, let's say it was half statewide, not good gross, that denominator ADM should be half, not 2/3. Half. That would reflect the burdens on localities. And then the other half would be population or some other measure. Maybe population should have some poverty measure. If all your population is in poverty, you have more demands on you than another kind of locality. So that's what I'm talking about, the crude nature of it. It doesn't reflect necessarily what the demands on you are by the way that the denominator is reflected. So, obviously, policy recommendations, these are just talking points now. The state, I'm sure from the local government perspective, they prioritize K-12. They start getting revenue, and they did some as I said, last session. So I think they want to, but they want to raise taxes even less. And so, you're at the firing line, you can raise those real estate taxes, keep your school divisions going. They're not as close, so they don't raise them. But when they do get more money, they need to prioritize public ed. But you've got to realize they've been cutting. There's only 2 areas of the state budget have grown over the last 10 years. The other one, that's Medicaid and debt service, and one other one, mental health. Because of all the issues that you see around mental health. Those are basically the 3. K-12 has been pretty much flat. Everything else, higher ed, everything else has been negative. It's been negative. They've been cut. Literally nominal dollars.
I want to make sure I'm hearing you right. You said that loss of students causes your composite index to go up, and the more wealthier individuals that come or are located in your county also cause your composite index to go up.
Yes, you have higher revenue capacity. When your students go down, the way the formula works, it says, well, you don't have to spend as much. So we're gonna make your composite, we're gonna make you pay more because you don't have to spend as much.
Thank you.
So anyhow, changing the LCI is very, very tough. I mentioned it 2 times it was. Those were very politically powerful actors that did that because it's a zero-sum game. Unless you do it like the non-resident adjustment. The way the non-resident adjustment works is they calculate everyone with all their AGI, and then they do a separate calculation, pulling the 33 guys out. They give you the lower, they give those 33 lower. It doesn't affect anyone else's. And so that's why they do it that way, so that zero-sum game is kind of not happening. Of course, it costs more money still, so you indirectly lose, you're not one of the 33, because it takes, it costs money to pay for their lower LCI. And it's very difficult to do, and so there's lots of discussion always about changing the composite index, but there's tons of viewpoints about that. I'll give you another one counties have, it's in your legislature, and you could say it is the use value taxation. Changing the true value of real estate through because of the use value taxation the localities have done.
What chances do you think the state will go back to reducing the age of legality if they stop using, I call it a local government refund check? That's right.
It's a good point. I have no idea, to be honest with you. I mean, that came out of nowhere in 2009 because they thought it was, they couldn't come up with any ideas, they didn't want to cut public ed anymore, so they just said, write a check back to those localities. Are we at that point? This is my gut. No. That 300 and 200 million problem we still have? I don't think they are. I think, as I'm hoping, revenues are going to get a little better than what they expect, which will take even more pressure off them. So, I hope I'm right. But yes. Anyhow, thank you. So, any questions that have you answered?
And I have extra copies of Jim's presentation in case you didn't get one or you want one. We'll just have them out here on the table.
you want to grab one.
And if anyone wants it electronically, just email one of us and we'll be happy to email it to you. Good. Nice to meet you.
Thank you very much, Jim. I think what we're going to do is just move along with our roundtable discussion. I'd like to introduce Katie Boyle, who joined the VACO staff. I've got to get rid of the word staff. We are a team. Okay? The VACO team 2 months ago. And I still haven't figured out some practical joke to play on you. Okay.
Oh, well, now I've been duly warned. Well, thank you so much for having me. And yeah, as Larry mentioned, we'll just kind of do an informal sort of round table. It's really helpful for us as staff to hear what's on y'all's minds. I think it's also probably helpful for you all to hear from each other about what's going on and what common interesting concerns that you share. So, without further ado, maybe we'll start with our host with Northampton, and we can just sort of talk about issues of concern and things that are going on. The floor is yours.
Thank you. One of the things that we know VACO has been working on, we've been tracking the success or lack of success, is DEQ regulations for stormwater management, erosion and sediment controls. I think it's not too far-fetched to say that the counties in the watershed, particularly the Western Shore and obviously Region 1, but some other counties, Matthews, Lancaster, Middlesex, Gloucester, and others are suffering tremendously. We're paying engineering fees for stormwater site plans and things. $30,000 worth of engineering fees to build a $10,000 building, and it's just untenable. We can't do it. I have spoken. The other issue is obviously the donut hole, which was kicked around and wasn't filled in any way, shape, or form. Is a burden on us as well, and it's a very real burden because we can't do economic development if people all of a sudden realize that the cost to get permits and not only just Virginia Department of Health issues, VDOT issues, and other issues, if the cost is just exclusive, then we're losing businesses, and we know that. And the delay because of the fact that we're using outside engineering firms. We don't have enough PEs or enough DEQ certified people here. Those fees are very, very high as well, and we can't always pass those on to our customers, our citizens. I think that, that has to be addressed. Now, I've spoken personally with Melanie Davenport, who answers reports to Taylor and others, and they seem to, it's interesting, they seem to understand what they created, but they can't do anything about it. And that, I think, is one of our major concerns. Obviously, school funding and what is just going through here, we think that composite index is the most unfair machination of arithmetic that ever was. We're land rich, I guess, by a lot of people, and then we do have some wealthy people here who obviously affect the AGI. So we just feel like that, we looked at it last time and we just couldn't understand it. The only thing that went up was the AGI. Our property values are going through the floor. So that just doesn't make sense to us. We need very much to borrow money for the new school in the next few years. The forecast, the lit loan, I'm sorry that so much of that is being used, it's not being used for building. We're going to need to go into the market probably in the next few years. We're working with our school board right now to determine exactly when that's going to be. But I'm seriously hoping that there will be plenty of low interest money available for us at that time. And obviously that may be a few years out, but it's not too far to think about it. We constantly battle with VDOT. We do a 7-year rolling plan every 7, I was on the board 9 years ago. We're still rolling some of the same projects. So VDOT, I mean, it's almost a bureaucratic waste of time. I just even hate to waste time with the staff on it. We don't get anything done. Now we rank the small scale projects. I'm sure Acamac's done the same thing. We just did that, in fact, last night and passed the resolutions for those. We hope, one of them was a joint project with Acamac that we've been trying to get done for, I don't know, at least 9 years. So we're hoping that somewhere in this funding, these revenue issues, that the state will be able to do something for the localities, for rural areas in VDOT funding. I'm sure there are other things. We looked at the legislative agenda. We're a poor county. We need economic opportunities. We need new ways. See that bottom thing right there? Provide additional revenue options for localities. We need those options, and if we don't get those, and we know all the rules. We know what keeping us from it. But we need additional ways to pull. If we're going to have more expenses pushed to us from Richmond, and the trend is just undeniable, we've got to have new ways to have revenue. We cannot continue to absorb it. Our property taxes right now, somewhere in the neighborhood of 70, some 80, almost 80% of our budget. It's unsustainable. We just cannot do it. We have to have new revenue options, and we're doing everything we can to get development on 13 and bring more businesses into our county. The transit occupancy tax is good for us. We like that tax. We're trying to maximize it as much as we possibly can. We'd like to have some flexibility in how to use that tax in the legislation. But other than that, I'll defer to some of my other board members here if I missed anything. Somebody can speak up. Mr. Vice Chairman?
It's really a P more than anything else. Please tell your friends in Richmond that if they're going to announce a 2% increase for teachers,
come forward with it.
Make sure they got the damn money, because schools in dire situation. Our budget's already passed.
Absolutely.
It was very embarrassing.
We sent a letter to the governor as soon as that was announced and said, hey, the state needs to meet its commitments because you all had to pass budgets. School boards had to pass budgets. You had to make commitments to employees. You should decide whether they were going to be up or not based on what you knew at the time. And so we have been assured by legislators that the raises will be the top priority when the General Assembly meets again. The governor has said he wants to make K-12 a priority, protecting new dollars. And that was a big applause line when he spoke to the money. I think people know, but that will be a top priority for us because, absolutely, we've heard that from many jurisdictions.
We have to, Vice Chairman Lamont is exactly right. We have to hit a forecast too. I mean, I can understand somebody missing the sales forecast or certainly revenues in any possible category. But my goodness, I mean, missing it that much, it was very, very painful to us, and I think that should be emphasized. Mr. Hall?
Yes,
please be brief.
You're on the clock, Fred. Yeah, I'm on the clock. To reaffirm the fact that transit occupancy tax, how important it is our golden goose. And when I say that, we have a competition between the campgrounds that are privately owned versus the state. Which it is, if the state's got a beautiful site down here at Tippecanoe, but we get no transient occupancy tax from it. They are exempt. And I'd like to see surely some other locality has this problem as well as we do, because they've got more than one state park. So I don't know how it is that we might be able to get our legislators to move forward on something there. I mean, would it not be, if I'm taking a look at the equity side of it and saying, here it is, private industry, you're making them compete. That's different. So, thank you.
Good point.
Do you want to say about stormwater?
Well, I just wanted to be very brief because if you talk about stormwater, I can stand here all night. I can even stay here till midnight. But I just want to say, do we expect this to be an active session coming up on stormwater? We have a lot of reasons to believe that. Delegate Keith Hodges.
Middlesex.
Yes,
Yeah.
Middle Peninsula.
Yeah, Middle Peninsula.
Work to have the Center for Coastal Policy, William & Mary. They're doing a study. There are going to be some recommendations that they will be submitting to him that might possibly be the basis for legislation in 2017 to address so many of these issues that you talked about, especially trying to get to this issue of the donut hole. And I'll just leave it at that. I'm not getting into detail about what that is. But anyway, that's the biggest reason.
I'm aware of those.
That's
That's
one of the reasons we had a delayed effective date to the legislation that just passed this session to allow for corrections and adjustments. Thank you.
Katie, just real quick on Mr. Murray's point when he said about the road, just to show you VDOT, there needs to be more consistency with VDOT. One road he's talking about is called Cemetery Road. It goes from one point to another. It happens across the county line. VDOT approved Accomack side and disapproved Northampton side. That just shows how crazy. You have one road and they approve one counties and the same road and disapprove the other. It makes no sense. It makes no sense. So that's the joint that Mr. Murray was talking about. It's just crazy that the state agency would do something like that on the same road.
There's transportation for us, so he's doing all that. So is that cover confusion or?
Yeah, anybody else?
Mr. Burns, one quick question, because you mentioned TOT. Are you seeing any effect of short-term rentals that are advertised on sites such as Airbnb or HomeAway?
We're dealing with that issue in the code right now. Temporary, obviously 29 days and under you can collect transit occupancy tax, but we're concerned and we want an ordinance that protects us to get transit occupancy tax wherever we can, obviously. But we're working on that very issue.
Thank you.
And to add on to that, to be sure it is that there's a definition of what a temporary, what is a temporary living quarter? Is it something that's 49 days or less, or is it 30 days or more? My understanding, 30 days or more for the would be long term.
I'll start off with including what Northampton has just brought forward. Maybe 3 issues that I'm concerned with, and one is to keep an eye out for the local government aid to make sure that the state doesn't start requesting a check, a refund check.
The state, the Commonwealth.
Exactly. And also keep an eye on and continue to support the health insurance group that's going through the General Assembly now, where all the counties can join in one group through the state system. So keep an eye on that. That would save us a considerable amount of money, probably more benefits. And also, always be alert to unfunded mandates, which is what stormwater is. It seems like every year there's an unfunded mandate that comes down from Richmond that we not only have to fund, but we have to apply. And we get the blame from local citizens. And stormwater is a perfect example. The local citizens blame us for enforcing the state regulations. So keep an eye out for unfunded mandates. It's a major problem.
Great point. On the local insurance pool, I think an email went out a couple days ago to all the county administrators asking for some expressions of interest for participating. I said it in a webinar about that, and I think the hope is to get kind of a critical mass of interest so that then the state can start putting together some figures in terms of possible rates and how a plan will be structured and stuff like that. So, yeah, so we're definitely watching that moving around. So, yeah, thank you.
Something else from Accomack that has always bugged me, Robert said it's unfunded mandates, but one is having the same taxing authority as city and towns. On the Eastern Shore, we have dinky little towns with 200 people, and they have more power than the county. Northampton's got 12,000 or more, we've got 35,000 or more, and these little small towns with 200 people can do more than we can by right, and we have to get permission. One is like the meals tax. They can just put a meals tax on, we have to have a referendum. And in Accomack, what happens, we have towns that put the meals tax on. When Accomack tries to vote on it, those same towns, the people in those towns vote against it. So their town already has it, and then they vote against the referendum because they vote in county elections. And it's just crazy. So small towns, but the taxing authority, and it's crazy that the General Assembly gives these little small towns that much power, and the counties who have 3, 4, 10 times the pop.
Absolutely.
But still allows them to vote in our referendums. Crazy.
You're totally right. And equal taxing authorities have a long-standing position for making,
Right.
they're making a big effort on meals tax.
And I'm sure it happens in the other counties too, because all the other counties that have towns like that, it's just
It's
crazy.
really an artifact. I mean, counties are doing just about everything cities are doing with the exception of roads. And so, you know, you're taxing your revenue.
But at least cities can't vote in the county elections. But these towns can vote in the town election and vote down something.
Katie, is Larry around?
Right here.
Oh,
I'm sorry.
I'm piggybacking on the stormwater issue, and one of the issues that is subtle but very important that we have actually experienced here in the last couple of years. Often the state will say, and you guys work hard, you know, lobbying and getting the bills right, and they'll say, well, we'll do it if you don't want to. Okay, and you know, they'll write that in the bill. But guess what? They won't fund it. They won't properly execute it, and they won't get the services that folks need. And so at the local level, then our elected officials are faced with the problem of saying, well, do you want to take on this program? No, not really. But then if we don't, the service falls off. And we're 4 hours from Richmond, 2 hours, probably an hour and a half from, you know, our area of stormwater, for instance, our regional headquarters. But my point is, that's, I don't know how you deal with that. I know they put standards, time standards that they had to resolve and respond. But in the meantime, administratively, they've fallen apart. The stormwater program is in a mess, and we all know that. And so when my board turns to me and says, can't we just give it to the state in good conscience? This is an issue for us, I think.
Right, and I might suggest to you, and that has been recognized as a problem, and we have heard it from other places. One possible way that you might want to get to that is in the stormwater regulations, there is a regulatory fee structure, program fees, which basically were set back in the year 2004 when the program was much different, and it didn't yield the type of revenues that neither localities nor the state needed in order to run the program. That structure has to be, changed. And there is a study to look at that right now.
Okay, well,
now, boy, I can't guarantee that they will get it right, but there is a study. They're going to get started in their work very shortly.
Well, thank you very much. I just say that when you're working on this bill in the future, anything you can do to encourage the state to step up. If they're going to take the responsibility, they need to step up and do it right, and not just, give it lip service, so to speak. And I'm sure I would probably get pummeled about the head and shoulders by a lot of state folks for hearing me say that. But our perception is that we can provide significantly better service today, and we have to pay to do that, as you know. The other issue that's a little bit prevalent here on the shore that may not be as common in other areas is the General Assembly's propensity to give away our local taxes on solar projects particularly. We probably got the last whole fully taxed project in the Commonwealth here in Accomack. And that was by the skin of our teeth. Because the General Assembly was rapidly changing the laws as we, went through the process. But we did finally get it wrapped up and approved with full tax benefits to the locality. But right after that, I think they changed those rules, and so Northampton, who's looking at one right now.
Well, it's going to be there. It's going to be there, Steve. And to your point, we can't tackle it.
Yeah. So there you go. So I'm
it's
just
under
saying.
20. It's under 20 meg. I'll get it right in a minute, megawatt, and we can't.
So, again,
19 point something, 19.8
if solar power is going to be the power of the future, then we need to see the same yield off of it, or an equivalent yield, at least a fair taxable, fair value yield, as we do with other types of energy production. And we've got a peaker plant in the northern end of the county, and Trust me, we've enjoyed having that peaker plant tax rise. It's put a lot of money in our coffers. And so just a point, you know, for the future reference, I think. In fact, I'll put it this way, our board feels so badly about it. And next Wednesday, we're going to take up a recommendation from our planning commission to do away basically with by right use for solar, because this is one of the issues. And it's going to, so my point is, you're going to see it affecting the industry. So you can take that message back to the General Assembly. If they want to give away the store and there's no relatively bad yield locally, there's going to be less incentive to approve these.
Okay. No, thank you. Jody.
Well, I was going to say, just because so everybody in the room understands that the tax hasn't changed. A couple years ago, General Assembly had said if you're 20 megawatts or less, you get full exemption from local machine and tool tax. It's now changing so that it's anything under 5 megawatts gets that total exemption. Anything over 5 megawatts, I believe that's the cutoff, it's 8% exemption from M&T, so you only pay partial M&T of 20%. So that's the effect. And so this is good feedback to hear. And I think probably just Ron, the most powerful thing is they're going to do away with the zoning authority, which you still have, to say, you know, this is the type of use. And so that's a powerful message to let the legislators know. So thank you.
Thanks, Joe. I think there were a couple of questions in the back and over here.
Question to the more concerned about localities who may have been penalized or fined by the state by not following the code requirements to the letter. If there are any
maybe Larry can speak to that.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear it very well.
Localities that are penalized for not complying.
There's an issue with the cloud of the heads of localities that if you don't, then you will be fined substantially by the state.
You mean by DEQ? Funded by DEQ, yes.
Right. So the question I have is, do we know of any communities that, because of whatever reason, it might be staffing, might be just their ability to make it happen, have now been penalized by DEQ? And if they're not being aggressive with that, then I guess the question I have now is, why should localities be aggressive with these requirements?
Yeah, I'm not sure I heard all of that. I think but in terms of localities being fined by DEQ, I have not really heard very much of that happening. I mean, what DEQ tells us is it's a very, very final resort to actually level a fine against a locality. I have not personally, I don't know if anybody here at VACO has received any complaints from other locality about any kind of penalty being assessed against them for failing to meet a particular environmental standard. Joe,
No, I just know that the local stormwater programs need to be effective, I guess was it July 1st, 2017. So really it's working towards that date, and we'll see what happens as to what DEQ will do. More likely, it's the EPA coming down and finding localities that have what's known as MS4 programs. They're starting to audit those, and that probably doesn't happen to a lot of localities represented here, more in the urban areas.
We've heard of dual kind of enforcement activities between the state and EPA. And a lot of times those might be larger, more organized localities, or what we call MS4 stormwater permits. But we'll keep our eye out for it.
Thank you for the show.
Thank you, Brad. I'd like to get back to the solar. I'm sort of the energies are back in my county, so I have 2 different land and a solar farm. And in my opinion, the state needs to cut any subsidies, any breaks at all to solar if it goes in good ag land. Because what you're doing is you are trading food production for energy production. And it's a bad trade because there is a large percentage of land in the United States and in the state of Virginia that is suitable for solar, that is not suitable for agriculture. The district that I'm in, they took some of the, probably about 900 acres of the best land on the eastern shore of production. We got much more than what Northampton's got in taxes, I got it. But it's chump change. And let me tell you, every time I look at things, it burns me up. And the people who live around them are steadily calling me, complaining, they don't like them. And, you know, the state needs to stop putting solar in good ag land because it's a waste. There's very little land in the United States that is as good as this. You can grow a crop on Eastern Shore, Virginia without having to irrigate. Now, it's much better if you can irrigate. But places like that are very few and far between. Look at California. We're going dry. You know, all the Great Plains going dry. Why? Because they have to depend on irrigation. We don't have to. We're a few hours from the largest population centers in the world. And to put solar energy in ag land here, in my opinion, is a colossal mistake. It's, I'm not saying don't put it in places where you have an industrial site or something like that, fine. But to take prime farmland, no. And, you know, it makes me sick when I ride through my district and see what's happening to it.
We don't have chicken eggs. That's
I think that's an excellent idea. And I live right between chicken houses on my west and solar farms in my north. And I would put my hand on any Bible and tell you I would rather live with chickens than a solar.
And people.
I'd like to pick up on that point about the solar farm myself. I wasn't on the board when this was approved, but I've driven up there to physically see what has happened to this prime agricultural land, like Grayson mentioned. We are raising electrons for Amazon. It's a federal tax write-off. We, as citizens of Accomack County, get no lower electrical rates. It hasn't changed that a bit. And it is, what would it has its place, solar has its place, but not on good farmland. It does not belong here. And I would caution anybody that thinks that this is going to be a gold mine for them, especially around here, that would think twice, to think real hard about allowing them. And I second the thing about chicken houses. I'd rather have chicken houses than have a solar farm.
Go to the other counties, if you don't go to the other counties, you're not getting there, Katie.
So sorry.
I do have a couple of issues. One is the state has been reluctant. The Virginia Inside Passage, which it is, that's a federal government entity in the law. There's no, and has it, the dredging of that and the maintaining of that, or the Corps of Engineers is giving up on it, Coast Guard is giving up on it, etc. But aside from that, that's a federal and federal side. When it is, if we go to the shallow draft type dredging and the like, which are the creeks of which it is that our watermen use, the state is very reluctant to do any funding whatsoever relative to shallow draft going to creeks. And this is more from the standpoint of Northampton and Accomack counties and our counterparts over in Gloucester or Middlesex, those areas. Matthews, Gloucester, York County, etc. So I would like for something to be thought about from the standpoint of the shallow draft and how it is that from the standpoint of commerce, the seafood and local seafood commerce, not necessarily intercoastal and interstate and international, but more from the standpoint of the locality. My second statement is the fact that our barrier islands here are being eroded away. Everybody talks about how it is that the water level rise. We agree that the water level rise. Recently, most recently, Cobb Island has now cut through, and it is now 2 islands. The issue that I bring about, and I'm sure that it's going to raise a lot of ears and eyes, as we have what was known as the Baylor Survey. The Baylor Survey identified that which was public lands, the lands of the people of the Commonwealth. As the Attorney General's office seems to refuse, if you want to say, defining where it is that state lands start or end, and where it is that private lands begin. The very islands, as it is, that they continue to wash back, or washing back onto the lands of the people of the Commonwealth. The second thing that goes along with that, in order to dredge, it can be a matter of where can we place the dredge spoil in a beneficial area that will benefit the people of the Commonwealth, as well as the uplands, as it is that we come up here. As it is that we have a hurricane, that is our buffer. That helps buffer before it is that it gets to the mainland. If not, you're going to be losing out on that. So the request would be, number one, get the Attorney General's office to remove its obstacle of determining what it is that the people of the Commonwealth own. And again, if the private ownership is out there and they have a tendency that they don't want to maintain their facilities and their land, it washes away. And instead of rolling back, I don't want to hear about erosion and accretion and how it is. Hey, when it gets to this point, baby's gone.
Okay. Isle of Wight. Yeah, folks are curious, sir.
Well, several of the other localities are doing some of the things that we're concerned about. Airbnb is probably going to be a little bit more of a prominent issue for us than maybe some of the other localities. It's something we're looking at very closely, and we certainly continue to monitor that. Alternative revenue sources, more keenly, as was mentioned, the ability to have equity as it relates to towns and cities is critically important for us.
Absolutely, equal tax majority has been a bedrock principle for us, and the board continue to advocate for. So, thank you. I know Airbnb generally has been working on a pretty extensive way, trying to protect the majority. Thank you.
I'm sure this issue has come up in other areas. Do you have any kind of a model that you can afford to present to the localities?
With respect to short-term rentals?
What short-term rentals, whether it be vacation rentals, Airbnb, whatever?
You know, all I can say is that every locality is different. And so you come up with your own solution typically as to what you think works best. And that's our issue with the legislation that last year. It was to preempt all local authority, and that's what we're fighting.
Thank you.
Isle of Wight taken care of? All right, how about Prince George?
Same as everybody else. Since about April, May, our only one word has been Petersburg. They're bankrupt. There are a number of many authorities at that, and when they can't pay the bills, the rest of us have to do it, because we can't shut off the water, we can't shut off the sewer, we can't put their inmates out of our jail, and
You find a need to air packs?
well, we
Remember that?
have, well, somebody's going to jail without.
I hope so.
But it's just, that's what we have to worry about. All of the other things come along, but we have to worry about what the impact is going to be and try to help them to try to get together better.
That's tough. It's sort of a novel situation, I think, in Virginia, what happens.
And the worst part of it is probably 3/4 of the city is from Prince George County. So if they revert back to a town.
Quite a negotiation. Thank you.
We do not want to see that.
Thank you.
So we just go along with everybody else. We agree with and most of us sit on the steering committee from the county. We agree with what the other people are putting forward. We know
No, 2%, yeah, that's a big factor. And the health insurance.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you.
working basis, pretty good on major issues. We certainly would like to see something done with the composite index since ours is, we were 3 other localities that have 80%. We've been used to it being high, and honestly, until tonight, I didn't understand why we went from 60, we made it to 66 and then jumped back to the 80, thanks to Jim. Student population numbers, I didn't know faculty was so strong. And, you know, from my personal perspective on the issues that have really brought up, it's highway construction or reconstruction, highway improvements. Hopefully, stormwater is, stormwater requirements and all are driving a lot of the costs, the environmental costs. If stormwater is being looked at, and maybe some of those regulations can be reduced a little bit, that it will help us be able to afford to do the highway project. But right now, I mean, it doesn't appear that we'll ever see a VDOT money for a project. Every time we use local money to fund a project, it turns out to be this mega highway. It's about that long. You're going to do 2 miles or 3 miles of reconstruction on the road, and then it comes to about 30 to a half a mile, because that's as far as the money.
No, but we want you to come back. We don't want you to be
Getting strangled out of affording to do road projects is a major concern.
Could I add one other thing? Back in there's a lot of aging infrastructure we have that is starting, well, basically the maintenance has been put off, monies have been taken that were maybe directed to cleaning up the issues of the drainage system. In the past, the money's been allocated and taken for different projects, and it's starting to show, especially in my district, which is Bayside and Pueblo. I'm talking about culverts across roads, and the call is, we have a dilemma that the state is supposed to maintain the right-of-way, their right-of-way, which includes the ditches alongside the roads. The county is responsible for the ditches that run down to, take the drainage down to the creeks over the day, and there's no coordination there, for one thing, and number 2, it's just not getting done. And that's because of lack of funds.
Surrey get taken care of? All right, how about Sussex?
Okay, actually the majority of the issues have been covered, so I won't go back over those, but there is one that's somewhat unique to Sussex as well as Southampton, who are in the Region 1, and that is the state's continued the state's continued efforts not to pay the payments in lieu of taxes those localities that have correctional facilities. As I said, in Region 1, that would be Sussex and Southampton, but it's about a total of 8 across the state. And since 2010, they just unilaterally said, we're not going to make these payments. In Sussex case, that equates to about $435,000. I think for Southampton, it's about $80,000. And the total for the 8 communities is about 1.2. So we want to continue to push and take over the numbers on that path, which is having been successful. We'd like to see that being so.
Right, so missed anybody? Forgive me, because I'm new, don't necessarily have a face with every jurisdiction, but I hope to do that as I work with you all going forward. But I covered everybody. All right, well, thank you so much. This was hugely helpful, very informative for me. Our staff is taking copious notes, so really appreciate your being willing to share your issues. And I will turn it back.
Chair Spencer, if you would call for adjournment.
Yeah, I need a motion to adjourn.
I move we recess until 9/26/16 at 5 p.m.
You've heard Mr. Dewar, the second, moved and second, all in favor, say aye. Aye. Aye, passed unanimously, we are in recess. want to thank Larry, you, and your wonderful team. Jim, I want to thank you for your presentation. Had I known it was going to be that, I would have had an open bar here earlier. But maybe that's an idea for next time.
Mr. Chairman.
Yes.
Mr. Chairman, on behalf of VACO's board, we want to thank Northampton for hosting, and also for all the participants. Also, on behalf of Region 1, John, thank you so much for having the meeting here. And on behalf of the Eastern Shore, we really appreciate Sussex, Olive White,